Tonight, we'll journey deep into the shadowed corridors of medieval Europe to a small village cloaked in mist and mystery. Our story begins with a woman named Elsbeth, whose nights were haunted not by dreams, but by visions. Terrifying apparitions, she claimed, were the devil himself, visiting her every evening in her humble stone cottage. Elsbeth was no ordinary villager. Known for her sharp mind and quiet demeanor, she lived on the edge of the village, where the dense forest whispered ancient secrets. The villagers whispered too, some in fear, others in awe, about the strange events surrounding her nights. But what compelled Elsbeth to speak so openly of her nightly torment? Was she a witch, a prophet, or something altogether different? In the age when the church held sway over souls and fates, her claims were both dangerous and compelling. The clergy came to question her, torn between skepticism and unease. Little did they know, her story would unravel threads of medieval belief, folklore, and a world teetering between faith and fear. The village itself was nestled beside the river. Why? Its waters winding gently through ancient woods. Life here was simple, but shadowed by superstition. People believed in spirits that roamed the forests and demons that tempted the weak of heart. The church was their guide and their judge, dispensing mercy and punishment in equal measure. Elsbeth's house was small, built of rough stones and topped with a thatched roof, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. Inside, the hearth fire flickered against the walls, lined with herbs and worn leather-bound books, a rare sight in such a humble home. Her nightly visions began soon after the harvest festival. One evening, as twilight bled into night, she saw a figure cloaked in darkness, with eyes like burning coals and a voice that hissed like the wind through dead branches. This was the devil, she said, come to test her soul. But Elsbeth did not tremble. Instead, she faced the specter with a steady gaze, asking questions no one dared voice aloud. Her courage and her story spread through the village, drawing the attention of the local priest, Father Gerard. Father Gerard was a man shaped by the austere world of his monastery, a keeper of faith and order amidst the turbulence of the late 14th century. He had heard many confessions, witnessed sorrow and hope intertwined, but nothing quite like the tale Elsbeth told when he first met her. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across her face, a face marked by quiet strength and haunted eyes. She spoke calmly, recounting each nightly visitation with startling clarity. At the hour when the veil between worlds was thinnest, speaking riddles and temptations in a voice both mesmerizing and cruel. But her story was more than a mere account of supernatural encounters. It was a window into the medieval mind, where religion, fear, and folklore melded into a fragile balance. Elsbeth claimed the devil challenged her faith, testing her resolve to the brink, but never breaking it. Her home became a place of whispered curiosity. Some villagers brought offerings of bread and salt, hoping to protect themselves from the darkness she spoke of. Others shunned her, fearing that her nightly audience invited doom upon the village. Father Gerard, torn between duty and doubt, sought answers in ancient texts. In the monastery's dusty library, he found writings on visions and demonic apparitions, cautionary tales, penned by monks who themselves wrestled with the invisible wars of the spirit. He wondered, was Elsbeth chosen by divine providence to withstand this trial? Or was she a victim of madness, her mind caught between reality and nightmare? Meanwhile, Elsbeth's nights grew longer, her encounters more vivid. She spoke of symbols the devil bore, an inverted cross carved into the bark of a tree near the forest's edge, strange runes etched into her doorframe, and whispers that curled like smoke around her ears. The church sent envoys to observe her, recording her words, her behavior, her very soul. What they found unsettled even the most hardened clerics. Elsbeth did not fear death. She welcomed it if it meant salvation from the torment. Yet she clung to faith in a way that defied their expectations. As the cold grip of winter crept over the village, the forest around Elsbeth's home grew silent, except for the occasional crack of ice on the river and the whisper of wind through barren branches. Nights stretched longer, and with them the shadow that haunted Elsbeth seemed to deepen. One evening, under a crescent moon, she sat by her hearth, tracing patterns in the flickering firelight, when the devil appeared once more. This time, his presence was different, his cold black eyes piercing through the veil of her resolve. "You are brave, woman of flesh and bone," he said, in a voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "But what will you sacrifice to prove your faith?" Elsbeth met his gaze steadily. "My life, my soul live, it brings light to those lost in darkness." Her words were a balm and a challenge. The villagers, hearing of this exchange, whispered of a woman who wrestled with darkness itself and did not yield. Yet fear and suspicion festered beneath their awe. Father Gerard wrestled with his own doubts. His duties compelled him to denounce visions of demons as temptations of the mind. Yet he could not deny the sincerity and strength he witnessed in Elsbeth. He sought counsel from the abbot, an austere man with years of wisdom etched in deep lines across his face. The abbot listened and spoke softly. "The devil walks many paths. Sometimes he seeks to break faith, sometimes to test it. Your charge is to watch, to guide, and to protect." In the weeks that followed, the village itself became a character in their story. Its stone church, with stained glass glowing dimly in the winter dusk. The narrow cobblestone streets where townsfolk moved briskly, avoiding the chill. The dense forest looming beyond, holding secrets older than the stones themselves. Elsbeth's visions became more intricate. She spoke of a figure cloaked not in fire, but in sorrow, who whispered truths and lies in the same breath. She began to question not just her faith, but the nature of evil and redemption itself. Scholars of the time debated such visions. Were they divine messages or the cunning of demons? Elsbeth's story soon spread beyond the village, carried on the lips of traveling monks and wandering bards, becoming part legend, part cautionary tale. Through it all, Elsbeth remained steadfast. Her nightly vigils, her courage, and the silent strength of a woman facing darkness made her a figure both revered and feared. As the seasons slowly shifted from winter's cold grasp to the tentative warmth of spring, the village's rhythm resumed. Yet the shadow of Elsbeth's story lingered like the last trace of frost on the morning grass. The villagers, caught between faith and fear, remained divided. Father Gerard, now more deeply entwined in Elsbeth's fate, wrestled with his conscience. Each visit to her humble home left him both troubled and awed. Her descriptions of the nightly visitor grew ever more vivid, a figure, not merely of darkness, but of unsettling familiarity, as if the devil himself carried the weight of sorrow and regret. In the cloistered corners of the monastery, Gerard pored over ancient manuscripts, seeking wisdom from saints and scholars who had walked similar paths before him. The writings spoke of visions as tests of faith, of spiritual battles waged within the soul, but none prepared him for the profound humanity he found in Elsbeth's resolve. One evening, beneath a sky woven with stars, Elsbeth confided in Gerard a secret she had long held close. The devil, she said, whispered truths about the corruption and cruelty she saw not just in the forests or villages, but within the very walls of the church itself. These revelations disturbed Gerard deeply, challenging his beliefs and his loyalty. News of her visions began to spread beyond the village, reaching the ears of higher clergy and noble patrons. Some sought to silence her, fearing scandal and heresy. Others viewed her as a messenger, a mirror, reflecting the church's own shadows. Amidst this turmoil, Elsbeth found solace in the natural world. She would walk the forest paths at dawn, gathering herbs and whispering prayers. The changing seasons became a silent companion, marking time as her spiritual journey unfolded. The devil's visits continued, each encounter peeling back layers of mystery and despair, hope and defiance. Elsbeth's story became a tapestry woven with threads of medieval superstition, religious fervor, and the indomitable spirit of a woman caught between worlds. As spring blossomed fully into summer, the village's landscape transformed. Fields turned verdant. Wildflowers painted the meadows in colors both bold and gentle, and the air carried the scents of earth and rain. Yet, beneath this beauty, the tensions surrounding Elsbeth remained unresolved. Father Gerard found himself at a crossroads. His faith was steadfast, yet the revelations Elsbeth shared gnawed at the edges of his beliefs. He began to question the nature of sin, redemption, and the true face of evil. Was the devil a being of pure malevolence, or a reflection of the darkest parts of humanity itself? Elsbeth's visions grew more complex. She described not just the devil's presence, but also whispers of long-forgotten rituals, of ancient pacts made in desperation, and of a church struggling to maintain its grip over the souls of the faithful. One night, after a particularly harrowing vision, Elsbeth awoke to find a small, charred symbol etched into the wooden beam above her bed, an inverted cross, unmistakable and chilling. The village was abuzz with rumors, and fear tightened its grip on the hearts of many. Despite this, Elsbeth's resolve did not waver. She spoke openly of her experiences to those willing to listen, weaving a narrative that was both cautionary and hopeful, called to confront darkness, not with fear, but with understanding. The local clergy grew divided. Some advocated for her excommunication, fearing her influence. Others pleaded for compassion, seeing in her a testament to faith's endurance under trial. In the quiet moments between day and night, Elsbeth and Father Gerard shared long conversations, exploring the depths of scripture, philosophy, and the human soul. Their bond became a beacon of light amidst the encroaching shadows. The weight of the summer sun pressed heavily upon the village, yet inside Elsbeth's small stone cottage, a chill seemed to linger, the lingering echo of nights steeped in shadow and confrontation. As the days grew longer, so too did the tales surrounding her, twisting through whispered gossip and wary glances. One evening, as twilight bled into darkness, Elsbeth prepared a simple meal, her hands steady despite the turmoil within. The devil's visits had shifted, no longer solely terrifying, but layered with a strange melancholy, a subtle invitation to understand rather than destroy. She recalled the stories of medieval alchemists, men and women who sought to transform base metals into gold and, more importantly, the soul's darkness into light. Perhaps her own torment was a form of spiritual alchemy, a painful but necessary transmutation. Father Gerard visited often, bringing with him ancient texts and words of cautious encouragement. Yet, even he struggled to reconcile Elsbeth's vivid accounts with the doctrine he had long held sacred. As the village prepared for the feast of St. John, a time when bonfires were lit to ward off evil spirits, Elsbeth found herself at the center of both hope and suspicion. Some saw her as a protector against darkness. Others feared she invited it into their midst. In the quiet hours before dawn, Elsbeth wrote in her worn journal, capturing the strange symbols, voices, and feelings that filled her nights. Her words became a testament, a fragile bridge between worlds seen and unseen. The devil's final question hung heavy in the air. What would she sacrifice to bring light into the shadows? As summer ripened into the golden hues of early autumn, the village seemed to hold its breath, caught between the warmth of the fading sun and the encroaching chill of approaching winter. The nights grew longer, and so did the silence that surrounded Elsbeth's home, in eerie stillness, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Elsbeth had become a figure both revered and reviled. The villagers' opinions were divided like the shifting winds. Some came seeking her counsel, believing her to be blessed with insight beyond mortal understanding. Others crossed themselves hastily and whispered prayers, fearing that her visions heralded a darkness yet to come. Father Gerard remained her steadfast confidant, though his faith was increasingly tested. Together, they pored over ancient scriptures, trying to decipher the cryptic symbols Elsbeth described. Among these was the image of a serpent entwined around a chalice, symbol of temptation and salvation intertwined. One night, during a particularly vivid vision, Elsbeth found herself standing at the edge of a vast chasm, the devil's voice echoing around her like a low thunder. Will you embrace the darkness to save your soul, or reject it and face oblivion? He asked. She responded not with fear, but with a quiet strength. I will seek the light within the shadows. Her words resonated deeply with the villagers who heard them, sparking both hope and unrest. Rumors swirled of secret meetings held under moonlight, where whispers of her story grew into legends. Yet, for all the talk, Elsbeth's nights remained lonely, her struggle unseen but deeply felt. With autumn's chill weaving its way through the village streets, the world around Elsbeth seemed to shift into a realm where the veil between the mortal and the supernatural thinned. The trees shed their leaves like memories, and the once vibrant fields now lay barren, as if preparing for the long slumber of winter. Elsbeth's visions took on new depths, no longer merely encounters with a shadowy figure, but profound dialogues that tested the very core of her beliefs. The devil, she said, spoke not only of temptation, but of sorrow, regret, and the fragile balance between light and darkness that governed the human soul. Father Gerard documented every detail, his careful script capturing the nuances of her tale, the symbols, the whispered riddles, the haunting questions that lingered like smoke. The village elders debated her fate fiercely. Some saw in her a prophetess, a bearer of difficult truths meant to awaken the faithful. Others whispered of witchcraft, of curses that might doom them all. One evening, as a dense fog rolled over the river, Elsbeth stood by her window, gazing into the mist-shrouded forest. The inverted cross marked on her doorframe glowed faintly in the moonlight, a silent reminder of the darkness she battled. In her heart, she carried a secret hope that through her trials, the village might find a new understanding of faith, one that embraced both the light and the shadows. Winter arrived with a fierce bite, blanketing the village in snow and silencing the once lively streets under a thick white shroud. The cold was relentless, and yet within Elsbeth's humble home, a different kind of fire burned, one forged from resilience, faith, and an unyielding quest for understanding. Her visions, once marked by fear and confrontation, had transformed into quiet meditations on the nature of good and evil. The devil, no longer a mere tormentor, seemed a reflection of humanity's own struggles, both the darkness we flee and the light we seek. Father Gerard, aged by months of worry and sleepless nights, found solace in her unwavering spirit. Their conversations deepened, touching on theology, philosophy, and the mysteries that lay beyond mortal comprehension. The village, though isolated by snow and frost, was alive with stories. Travelers and pilgrims passed through, drawn by whispers of the woman who dared to speak with shadows. Some came seeking answers, others redemption. One night, as the wind howled beyond the windows, Elsbeth penned her final reflections in her journal. She wrote of sacrifice, courage, and the fragile hope that even in darkness, light might prevail. Her story, whispered through generations, became a testament to the enduring human spirit, a slow-burning flame in the heart of medieval darkness. By midwinter, the snow lay thick upon every roof and path, silencing even the gossip. The village had drawn inward, families gathering close to hearths, telling old stories to pass the long nights. But Elsbeth's tale, no longer just hers, continued to move between mouths like a sacred chant or forbidden hymn. The bishop's emissaries arrived one morning just after Epiphany, cloaked in violet and sable, their horses breathing fog into the frozen air. They bore no warmth, only questions. Word had reached the cathedral that a woman, not ordained nor trained, was claiming visions of the devil, and not with horror, but contemplation. The interrogations were quiet, yet exhaustive. Elsbeth answered, not with certainty, but with clarity. She spoke of dreams as foggy as the moors, of voices not heard, but felt, and of a darkness that did not consume, but questioned. One of the emissaries, a young scholar priest named Corvinus, took a private interest in her writings. He had studied mystics in far monasteries, Julian of Norwich, Hildegard of Bingen, and found in Elsbeth's words something uncannily similar. Not heresy, but tension, a soul caught between realms. He asked to see her dreams, those she had sketched or written, scrawled across candle-waxed pages, and when he saw them, his expression changed, not to fear, but to wonder. The serpent and chalice, he whispered, the sacred paradox. You draw it as if it haunts you, yet it's the very image of divine tension. Elsbeth smiled faintly. I only draw what I see, Father. Corvinus remained longer than the others, drawn less by duty and more by the quiet gravity of Elsbeth's presence. He was unlike the stern clergy that had passed judgment before he listened, not to condemn, but to understand. Together, they spent long evenings before the hearth, Elsbeth recounting the strange logic of her visions, and Corvinus cross-referencing them with ancient texts, some sanctioned, others forgotten. One passage he read aloud stayed with her. Not all who walk with shadows are lost to them. Some are merely torchbearers, afraid to look behind. He believed her, not blindly, not without concern, but with an academic curiosity and spiritual openness rare among his rank. Still, the church required a verdict. A tribunal was called, but it would not take place in the village. Elsbeth was summoned to the monastery of Saint Elterina, stone fortress carved into a mountain cliff, veiled in perpetual mist. It was there that the most unusual cases were tried, in chambers echoing with centuries of whispered judgments. The journey was long and solemn. Villagers lined the road, some weeping, others watching in silence. She left behind her home, her journal, and the quiet grave of her mother, all entrusted to Father Gerard's care. As she traveled through frost-laced forests and across frozen rivers, Elsbeth felt not fear, but a strange calm. She was no longer simply the woman who saw the devil. She was the story now, carried forward by every step she took toward Saint Elterina. What she did not yet know was that her arrival would not mark the end of her visions, but the beginning of something far deeper, revelation that even the church could not ignore. Saint Elterion loomed from the mists like a forgotten thought. Its towers pierced the sky like cold needles, and the wind that rushed through its narrow corridors carried with it the scent of dust, wax, and parchments, centuries of silence folded into stone. Elsbeth was led not to a cell, but to a small chamber lined with ancient tapestries. A fire crackled softly in the hearth. The monks here were different, quiet, observant, their eyes marked not by suspicion, but by the weight of long study. Over the next weeks, they examined her, not just her words, but her soul. They questioned her gently, fed her sparingly, and watched as she dreamed. At night, scribes sat nearby, transcribing her murmurs, recording every tremble and breath. One monk, Brother Theodric, confessed he had never heard visions described with such aching clarity. "They come to me," she whispered one dawn, "not with horns or flame, but like forgotten children asking to be remembered." She spoke of the devil not as a beast, but as a mirror one that showed the truths people buried in prayer and ritual. She saw not only fire, but memory, regret, grief. The tribunal never came. Instead, the abbot called for Silence's sealed archive, but Corvinus disagreed. To hide her is to deny what burns within the church itself, he told them. What if she is not here to destroy us, but to remind us? Elsbeth remained at the monastery, but not imprisoned. She was offered the cloistered life, should she choose it. A cell not of punishment, but of retreat, a sacred place from which visions and healing might one day be shared. And in time, whispers of her writings began to circulate once more. In the hush of her cloistered cell, Elsbeth found a kind of peace, not the absence of struggle, but the stillness that settles when one stops fleeing their own mind. The chamber was narrow, the walls bare, save for a small wooden cross and a solitary window that offered a sliver of gray northern sky. She wrote constantly, quills dulled against parchment. Ink ran like river water through the valleys of her thoughts. Her journals, once scattered and wild, now took form in volumes each, marked not by chapters, but by phases of the moon. She wrote of her encounters, of the strange warmth in the devil's gaze, of how his questions unraveled the pride of certainty and left only the humility of doubt. Brother Theodric became her most faithful companion. Though they spoke rarely, their silences were full. He brought her bread and wine, but also books, forgotten treatises, mystic commentaries, and translations of ancient Eastern philosophies the church dared not name. It was during one snowfall, thick and endless, that Elsbeth began to write, not for herself, but for others. She addressed her entries not to God, nor to the devil, but to those who fear both. She called them the watchful ones, souls like her own, who lived between light and shadow. Her words carried beyond stone and mist. A scribe in another monastery copied a passage. A bishop in the south quoted her in secret, and a young noblewoman, disillusioned by ritual, whispered Elsbeth's name during her evening prayers, not as a saint, but as a sister in doubt. She was no longer Elsbeth the heretic, nor Elsbeth the seer. She was simply the listener. Years passed like pages turned by a patient hand. Elsbeth aged not in bitterness, but in stillness. Her hair silvered, her fingers bent from writing, yet her eyes remained clear bright with that same quiet fire that had unsettled priests and comforted the broken. Her cell, once barren, now held shelves of writings bound in linen and twine, each containing reflections no sermon dared speak aloud. Pilgrims began to arrive at St. Elteria not in droves, nor with spectacle, but quietly. A mother who had lost a child, a monk tormented by visions of temptation, a widow who had seen her husband die under false accusations. They came not for miracles, but for words, and Elsbeth gave them words, soft ones, careful ones. She did not offer absolution, but understanding. She would listen and then write, a line, a phrase, a question to carry home like a candle through the fog. One winter, Corvinus returned not as an emissary, but as a man burdened by the weight of rising church politics. His hair had thinned, and his voice trembled when he spoke of how Rome had changed. "There is no room for visionaries," he said, "only enforcers and flatterers." Elsbeth smiled, as if she had always known. "Then let us make room in silence." That night she gave him a manuscript, her last, the Gospel of the Fractured Light, she called it, a collection of dream parables, reflections, and contradictions. In it, she wrote, "Truth is not a cathedral of marble and gold. It is the hush that remains when your certainty crumbles." Corvinus wept when he read it. He returned south with the manuscript hidden beneath his cloak, knowing he might never see her again. But Elsbeth did not need to be seen. She had become a myth one, still alive, perhaps, but already woven into the quiet spaces between scripture and shadow. The final winter came without warning. It arrived not with storms or omens, but with a gentle quiet that settled over St. Elterion like a woolen shawl. Elsbeth, now frail and slowed by time, could no longer write. Her quill lay untouched beside her bed, and her parchment remained blank, for her words had all been spoken, and what remained was silence. Brother Theodoric sat by her bedside each dusk, whispering the stories she once told, now returned to her like old friends visiting for the last time. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she wept, but never from fear. Her dreams came less frequently now, and when they did, they bore no devil, no flamingly wide fields, open skies, and voices laughing somewhere just out of sight. She passed on a moonless night, her breath soft as candle smoke. There was no grand funeral, only the quiet lowering of her body into the earth near the monastery walls, where the mist rolled in eternal curls and the wind carried no name. Her grave was marked not with marble, but with a single line etched in soft stone. She listened, yet her voice did not vanish. In secret scriptoriums and quiet corners of convents, her writings lived uncopied by trembling hands, passed between seekers, hidden beneath floorboards and behind false walls. Some said the church tried to erase her. Others claimed it had simply forgotten. But her story endured not as doctrine, but as comfort. A tale told beside fires, in monasteries, in forests, in places where fear and faith blurred. And somewhere, perhaps, in a dream you've had and forgotten, a woman with silver hair stands in the mist, not asking you to believe, nor to kneel, but to wonder, to sit with the questions, to listen to the silence, to remember her name, even if the world does not.